This week on ANN, the president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church encourages government and faith leaders in Russia to keep the Protestant Reformation alive.
The leader of the church's trans-European region petitions members of the European Parliament to use grace and tolerance when championing religious freedom.
And 8 lawyers in the United States are admitted into the bar for the nation's Supreme Court.
These stories and more coming up.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
The president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church marked the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation last week with an address to top clergy and government leaders in Russia.
Ted Wilson encouraged participants of the Reformation Forum in Moscow to seek a God-guided reformation of the heart.
During his address, Wilson said, "The Reformation must help make Christianity practical, preach the gospel to the poor, heal the brokenhearted, preach deliverance to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and set at liberty those who are bruised."
He went on to say, as the Reformation continues, may these principles burn in our hearts and help us truly fulfill the Protestant Reformation.
The forum took place at the Pashkov House, an 18th century mansion beside the Kremlin walls.
15 speakers led out various sessions for the forum's 200 attendees. Among the speakers was senior Kremlin aide Sergei Kiriyenko, who brought greetings from the nation's president, Vladimir Putin.
The leader of the Adventist Church's trans-European territory also recently addressed a group of dignitaries to mark the Reformation. Rafat Kamal told participants of the European Parliament celebratory on August 17 that the Reformation is unending. He also told the members of Parliament and faith leaders to keep grace at the forefront of their advocacy. TED News sent this report.
And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. The words ascribed to Martin Luther, as he held fast to the dictates of his transformed conscience, to act justly and love mercy, have inspired generations of believers and non-religious people alike.
A group of European parliamentarians, they invited me to come here to make a presentation together with 7 other church leaders and politicians in the connection with the Reformation, and also linking it with issues of religious liberty, conscience, church dialogue with the European Union. And that was a great opportunity for us to be visible, to talk about issues that are close to our heart, about Jesus Christ, the center of our transformation, and also bring issues about what the church is doing in areas of religious liberty, ADRA, for example, our health work, our also schools and education system. So that was a privilege today to be here at the European Parliament to talk to colleagues and friends and also attendees about the Reformation in this context.
In conclusion, the Protestant Reformation is not a historical event frozen in the 16th century. On the contrary, the Reformation's spirit and message must be rediscovered and lived today if we are to make the most of its core and principles. You and I are saved by grace, through faith in Jesus Christ. These biblical convictions threaten the power of the powerful and change the destiny of Europe.
Coming out of the meeting, I was impressed by the openness, by the presentations, by the stories, personal experiences in connection with the Reformation. And also the openness in the sense that Martin Luther and the other reformers didn't always get it right. It also had negative repercussions on the message that they sent out to the wider community. But the unending Reformation, the implication on today, based on the Word of God, we saw this, we see this, and I saw this today in the presentation that was shared at the Parliament.
Eight Adventist attorneys from the United States last week were recognized for achieving the competence and experience to allow them to argue cases before the nation's Supreme Court. The lawyers were officially admitted as members to the bar of the United States Supreme Court on November 1. Chief Justice John Roberts admitted the attorneys when General Counsel of the Adventist Church, Karnik Dumikshian, sponsored their admission. Those admitted were Harold Cleveland Jr., Allison DeChoso, Theodore Flo, Meredith Job, Maria McFall, Josh Pierre, Lisa Thomas, and Jesus Uriarte. After the ceremony, they were able to remain in the courtroom to hear a case argued before the full Supreme Court. The attorneys now have access to limited seating during Supreme Court hearings and access to the court's library for research and study.
The Seventh-day Adventist Church also marked the beginning of the Protestant Reformation by publishing a book that explores the movement's profound and complicated legacy. The book is entitled A Conversation on the Reformation, Christian Identity and Freedom of Conscience. It was released at the church's headquarters in the U.S. state of Maryland by Ganoon Diop. Diop serves as the director for the church's Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Department. October 31 is said to be the day Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses on the door of Wittenberg Castle. Diop says the book examines the impact the Reformation has on freedom of religion and belief. During his remarks, he said, "In many ways, the Reformation was a lightning bolt that changed the course of history and helped shape the modern world, certainly in terms of religion, but also in terms of politics, law, and philosophy as well." To learn more about the book, visit AdventistLiberty.org.
The anniversary was also highlighted by a group of Adventist youth in the nation of Poland. Groups reenacted Martin Luther's actions in 5 of Poland's largest cities. A group of Adventists in Krakow set up an old-fashioned door in the middle of the city's main square. There, passers-by would see an Adventist young adult who was dressed as Martin Luther, preaching and nailing theses to the door. Another reenactment took place at the city's International Book Fair. This fair drew 70,000 people, including notable authors such as Dan Brown and Eric Emanuel Schmidt. The youth performance at the church's booth attracted 10,000 visitors. At the booth, visitors were also offered leaflets from Signs of the Times and books, including The Great Controversy and Dr. Ben Carson's notable book, Gifted Hands. Visitors also received books and DVDs related to Hacksaw Ridge and other materials about the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Thousands of Adventists in Kigali were applauded by a minister of state of Rwanda while they conducted their monthly community service projects.
Harilimana Siriake, the Director for Socioeconomic Development in the Ministry of Local Government, thanked the group for significantly contributing to the nation's development.
The Minister of State said, "When you take this precious time to do the community work, it is another pillar you are adding to the existing ones that build our country. I thank you for this."
He also asked Adventists to help fight corruption, create a culture of productive dialogue, and promote cleanliness and hygiene.
Coming up, 2 books written by Ellen G. White become the first of her works to be published in Farsi. The publications mark a major effort for reaching residents in Afghanistan.
But up next, the president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church uplifts members in Malaysia during an historic visit to the country.
Welcome back.
Ted Wilson recently became the first president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church to visit the nation of Malaysia. There, he addressed a gathering of about 4,000 in the city of Kota Kinabalu.
During the special ceremony, he underscored his commitment to help strengthen outreach efforts within Malaysia.
Nearly 56,000 Adventists can be found in Malaysia, which has a population of 31.2 million people.
According to local church leaders, Malaysia's largest concentration of Adventists lived in Sabah. This is partly due to religious freedom laws and the historic work of missionaries from Indonesia.
In the face of those statistics, Wilson encouraged members to renew efforts to participate in the church's World Initiative Total Member Involvement.
Afghan people now have the opportunity to read books written by the co-founder of Adventist Church, Ellen G. White, in the language of Farsi. The release of Steps to Christ and the Story of Redemption took place during the year-end business meetings of the church's Euro-Asia territory. Afghanistan currently has no Adventist churches or known church members. The president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was present during the book's unveiling. In an interview after his prayer dedication for the books, Ted Wilson said, "It's so exciting to see how the publishing ministries have focused on very low-entered settings, such as Afghanistan." He went on to say, "Books that they have produced are going to be extraordinary opportunities for the people to share the Word of God in a careful and loving way." The publishing director of the church's Euro-Asia territory, Pavel Liberansky, also presented the first Russian-language Glow evangelism tracts for distribution in Russia. He also presented the Russian-language edition of Open Door, a storybook about literature evangelism. The book was written by International Coordinator for the Glow Ministry, Kamel Metz.
Now let's travel southeast to another country in the Middle East. Church leaders in the United Arab Emirates are celebrating the largest Adventist baptism in the territory. 26 people were baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church during a camp meeting for the church's Gulf territory. The new members will join the fellowship of 7 churches. The president for the church's Gulf field is Stephen Manukian. After the baptism, he said, "By God's grace, the various outreach programs in place in our field and the prayers of our brothers and sisters all over the world, we look forward to many more such baptisms and even bigger as we continue to invite the people around us to the kingdom." The Gulf Field is part of the church's Middle East and North Africa territory, which is headquartered in Beirut, Lebanon. It has 19 churches and 5 companies and about 2,018 members.
An Adventist hospital in the U.S. state of Florida recently hosted a collection drive to assist Puerto Ricans. The nation and its residents are still suffering from the effects of Hurricane Maria, which struck nearly 2 months ago. More than half of the island is still without electricity, and thousands remain displaced from their homes. The second Blessings for Puerto Rico collection was organized by Florida Hospital in partnership with Cox Media Group Orlando and the Adventist Church's Florida Territory. Residents of Florida's Central region donated hundreds of pre-packaged meals, bottled water, and baby supplies. The items filled 8 24-foot box trucks. The president and CEO of Florida Hospital and Central Florida Division of Adventist Health System is Daryl Toll. After the collection drive, he said, "The need Puerto Ricans are still facing is critical. It's been heartwarming to see our community rally together and come out time after time to help them back on their feet as they recover and rebuild." Items will be shipped via 40-foot-long containers. They will be distributed in Puerto Rico by the Adventist Development and Relief Agency. Once emptied, the containers will be converted into housing for displaced residents.
Tens of thousands of residents in West Venezuela were recipients of a week-long mass outreach effort throughout the region. Approximately 35,000 Adventists took off a week from work and school to perform acts of community service. The regional project was part of the church's Cerca de Ti, or Close to You initiative. Outreach efforts included blood donation drives, dental clinics, face paintings for children, canvassing, and city beautification efforts. According to organizers, 48,000 pounds, or 22,000 kilos, of trash was collected throughout transportation terminals and city squares. Further, more than 2,000 trees were planted throughout 56 locations in West Venezuela. But the acts of kindness didn't stop there. More than 10,000 people visited 20,000 communities, organized 80 sporting events, and distributed 9,000 items of clothing. The president of the church's West Venezuela territory, Julio Palacio, was excited to illustrate how God's love provides hope even in times of despair. Palacio said, "This Close to You activity reminds us of Jesus' ministry of forgiveness and healing. He loves everyone the same, just as John 3:16 says, and he will soon return for us."
And finally, for the news this week, we're continuing our coverage of the Rohingya refugee crisis.
The Adventist Development and Relief Agency in Bangladesh is attending to the needs of the refugees within the nation's borders. The humanitarians have distributed thousands of food packages to 3 various refugee camps.
Each food package from ADRA includes sugar, salt, and cooking oil to complement rice packs provided by the World Food Program.
The Rohingya are a stateless Indo-Aryan ethnic body and considered to be the world's most persecuted people.
There are more than 600,000 Rohingya living as refugees in Bangladesh. Most of the refugees are children.
Many of them fled Myanmar after August 25, when a violent outbreak led hundreds of thousands of Rohingya to abandon their homes.
Coming up, learn about a new series that will bridge your understanding of how mission offerings help the church's international missionary work.
But up next, the people of Britain rejected Romanism as the standard religion after the church ruthlessly killed these 2 reformers. Learn more right after this.
I remember that happy day when I finally proposed to my high school sweetheart. I was so excited, I literally counted down the days until the wedding date. But you know, the thing that I looked forward to the most was just being able to be together, to live life together, to finally be with each other. You know, no more good nights over the phone, no more vacations or trips without each other, no more heartsick goodbyes. Wherever I would be, there she could be too. And it's that same kind of eagerness. You know, the eagerness of a groom who just can't wait for the wedding day. It's that eagerness that I hear in the voice of Jesus in John chapter 14, verse 2 and 3, when he says, I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And that's the voice of the heavenly groom saying, I am coming again, and I can't wait to be with you. Man, you can't help but realize that what's highest on his mind is getting to be with us for eternity. I can lift up my head knowing that Jesus is coming, and that he's coming as that heavenly groom who can't wait for that day that where he is, I can be with him.
Welcome back.
Before this man was burned to death, he said, we shall this day, by God's grace, light a candle in England, as I trust in God shall never be put out.
Hugh Latimer spoke those words to Nicholas Ridley as they faced the flames together for preaching against Catholic teachings in Britain.
As the New World was discovered by Columbus in 1492, 2 men were born on this side of the Atlantic who would have a powerful impact on the shaping of Protestantism in Britain, Latimer and Cranmer. Hugh Latimer was born in 1491, here in the small village of Thurcaston, just north of Leicester, a similar area that John Wycliffe would have worked just over a century before. His father was a farmer, and yet despite their humble occupation, he made sure that Latimer stayed in school and got an education, a vital decision that would take him far in life. He enrolled in Cambridge University at the age of 14, and in 1510 was elected a fellow here at Clare College. He was at the time an ardent papist and preached passionately against men such as Luther and Melanchthon for 7 years. His belief in Catholic teachings was great, and his zeal in the divine mission of the papacy was unshakable. So what turned this pillar of papism into a pillar of Protestantism? An encounter with a man by the name of Thomas Bilney, who afterwards would visit him, even coming to the confessional booth to speak with him, and he eventually changed his views. The 2 men would later go and visit the sick and imprisoned in Cambridge together. Latimer went on to become the royal chaplain and the bishop here in Worcester, advocating for papal reform and denouncing the clergy who did not own a Bible, or the parishioners who could not even recite the Lord's Prayer. His clarion call to reform ended him in prison in 1539, but he was spared the stake by the intervention of Thomas Cromwell. He remained in prison until the death of Henry VIII, when Edward VI released him from prison. He would never ever hold the high office of bishop again, but continued to preach regularly, where audiences enjoyed his preaching, which was known for its wit, its intelligence, and its biblical nature. When Edward VI died on July the 6th, 1553, England was thrown into turmoil. Lady Jane Grey ascended the throne, but only had it for 9 days before Mary Tudor took the throne. Despite initial favor toward the reformers, her intentions of making England a Catholic nation soon became clear. Mary ordered the arrest of Latimer, and word reached him that his captors were on their way, offering him an opportunity to escape, but he chose not to. As he passed Smithfield on his way to London, he commented, "This place has long groaned for my life." Imprisoned here at the Tower of London, he met Nicholas Ridley, Bishop of London, and Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury. In March of 1554, they were tried here in Oxford, where Latimer was asked whether the natural body of Christ was in the sacrament, to which he responded, "Our Saviour's body is in heaven, whither he departed at the Ascension." He went on to explain that the change at communion was not in the bread, but in the heart of the believer. He and Ridley were sentenced to death, and on the 16th of October, they were brought to the place of their execution outside Balliol College. Here, a cross marks the ground of the exact spot where they were burned to death. Before the flames, they shared an embrace, and Ridley said to Latimer, "Be of good cheer, brother. God will either assuage the fury of the flames or strengthen us to endure it." Latimer then responded, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day, by God's grace, light a candle in England, as I trust in God, shall never be put out." History says that Latimer died soon after, but Ridley died a slow and painful death. The cost of their death was just over £1.05, but the real result was the overthrow of Romanism here in England. The entire country was appalled by a religion that had to resort to such brutal methods in order to sustain itself. As we contemplate their life and their death, the real question for us though is, does the light that they lit at their death still burn in our lives and our witness today?
To learn more about Protestantism in Britain and the spread of the Reformation throughout Europe, visit lineagejourney.com.
For this week's social media segment, Emily Mastrapa introduces a reality-style show that follows a missionary in Bangkok, Thailand.
Are you ever curious about where your mission offerings go? Do you wonder how they actually affect places around the world? Well, I Want This City offers a look at the correlation between mission offerings and what happens at the front lines of mission. Missions offerings have been on the steady decline. In response to this decline, the church produced I Want This City. The reality-style show follows a missionary in Thailand's capital, Bangkok, for 9 months. You can see what mission offerings are doing there and how you can help contribute. I Want This City airs on 3ABN every Wednesday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Go to 3abn.org/media to watch. You can also visit thiscity.adventistmission.tv to watch previous episodes. For more information, visit their Facebook page at I Want This City. Like the page to get updates, behind-the-scenes stories, and more. I hope you can join us on Wednesday for the next episode.
And finally, for today's program, let's turn to David Trim for a look at Adventist history.
This week, learn about early Adventist missionaries who served in Ecuador.
Welcome to This Week in Adventist History. On November 7, 1905, George W. Casebeer, a native of Iowa, arrived with his wife Mary in Ecuador. They were just the second and third Adventist missionaries to Ecuador, and George was the first ordained Adventist minister in the country. He became superintendent of the newly organized Ecuador mission. The first convert in the country was baptized just over 18 months later in 1907. And 108 years later, there are 60,000 Seventh-day Adventists in Ecuador. On November 11 in 1955, John F. Hunegart passed away, aged 79. Christened Johann Friedrich Hunegart, he was born in 1875 in Russia to a German family which emigrated to the U.S. state of Kansas when he was a child. Aged 22, he went back to Europe as a missionary. That was in 1897, and the following year was sent to work in Hungary. You see him here from a photo taken for his passport renewal in 1913. In 1900, John had married Eliza Buchanan, and they served as missionaries in Hungary and neighboring countries until 1919. John served there as a conference and a union president. He later served as secretary of the North American Foreign Language Department at the General Conference from 1925 to 1929, when the Hunegarts returned to Europe as missionaries. John served as president of the Yugoslavian Union for 6 years. They returned to the U.S. finally in 1936, where John pastored German-speaking churches in California until the age of 74. In addition, for 34 years, from 1921 until shortly before his death, he edited the North American Division's German language journal. And as a colleague recalled, throughout the 1940s, John and Eliza spent countless hours in preparing packages of food and clothing to be sent to the needy in Europe. Hunegart was a giant of Adventist mission in Eastern Europe. That was This Week in Seventh-day Adventist History.
Thanks for watching ANN. Join us next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
We'd love to hear from you. Send us your feedback and tell us how your church is making a difference in its community.
Be sure to capture plenty of video footage and photos, then write up a summary of the event's important details, and feel free to send full video reports as well.
You can reach us by sending an email to annvideo11@gmail.com.
Before we say goodbye, here's some good news from the book of Zephaniah, chapter 3, verse 17.
The passage says, "For the Lord your God is living among you. He is a mighty Savior. He will take delight in you with gladness. With his love, he will calm all your fears. He will rejoice over you with joyful songs."
That's our program for this week. And remember, you can always visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.